Welcome to our house, the House of Fi. At the House of Fi, we are all about achieving financial independence for families. Wherever you are in your financial independence journey, we want our house to be a place where you can learn and get inspired. If you are a parent on the journey to Fi, then come on in. We're glad that you're here. Here are your hosts, Wendy and Tamika.
Welcome back, House of Fi family. Today we have another great show. We have Justin from Root of Good on, and also with me, of course, is my lovely co-host Tamika.
Hi, guys.
So before we get into the interview, Tamika and I have a surprise for all of you. As most of you know, Tamika was featured last week on the Choose Fi podcast, episode 102. Well, it was a hugely successful episode, and since then we have been flooded with all kinds of questions about Tamika's side hustle, the Lice Clinic. So listen into this special episode this Friday, where Tamika will field questions about her six-figure side hustle, and you can all learn a bit about her business, as well as the process she used for getting started. Again, that's this Friday. And if you get a chance to listen, shoot us an email or a voicemail and let us know what you think.
So today we are talking with Justin McCurry, who writes an awesome fire blog found at rootofgood.com. Justin is a husband and the father of 3 kids. He became financially independent by the age of 33 years old and retired from all full-time work. On our previous episode, we spoke to Jackie Cummings Koski, who has also reached Fi, but mentioned suffering from 1 more year syndrome, where she finds herself hesitating to take that fire leap. This week, we wanted to bring Justin on the show so that he could take the reins and tell us what steps he took in order to actually make the leap and retire early. Not only are we going to talk about that fire leap, but we are also going to get deep into the weeds about what it really feels like to create a life where you can escape the 9 to 5 and devote your time to your family instead. And with that, Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Tamika and Wendy. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to share what I've learned along the way on my journey to fire.
Well, we're both excited to hear it. I think both of us, we're both on the road, and we both have this vision of what it's going to look like and what it's going to feel like. And so we're really excited to talk to you to get your take on, how does anticipation mesh with the reality of actually being financially independent. So Justin, can you give us just a little bit of your backstory, since some of our listeners might not be familiar with who you are?
Certainly. So I grew up in North Carolina. I've lived here in Raleigh almost all of my life. I retired at 33, and now I am 38. So I've been retired for a little over 5 years now. In terms of what did I do to make money, I went to engineering school and then law school. Decided law was not for me, so I went back and worked as an engineer for 10 years. Saved, invested, and retired early. A little bit more about me. I have a wife who was working in finance for about 10 years as well, here in the Raleigh area. And we have 3 kids that are currently between ages 6 and 13. And that's my life in a nutshell.
So one thing that I love about when I hear your episodes on different podcasts is that you're always so candid when you're discussing your fire journey, and also your blog is very candid. When you describe fire, it often seems like it was something that just logically happened in your life, kind of like the next logical steps. You made a good amount of money, not even 6 figures, and you saved the difference. So I don't know, for many of our listeners and even us as hosts, that natural progression either didn't happen, or for whatever reasons we were derailed along the way. Can you take us back to the beginning and explain how you found fire? Were you always saving before fire? And then what was your thought process when it all began?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess to rewind quite a bit, I've always been fairly frugal, so that, frugality, spending less than what I made or what I had in terms of income, that was how I was living high school throughout college. I always had a job throughout high school and into college, but I always managed to save some money. Even if I didn't make a lot of money, I was still saving money. I graduated from college and started my first full-time job as an engineer. I was making, I think, 48,000 per year that first year, and we live in Raleigh. It's not a very high cost of living area. So even on that one salary, we were actually able to still save and invest right from the get-go, right out of college. But it wasn't saving and investing for financial independence and early retirement. I didn't really know about those concepts at the time. It was really just responsible people. That's what you do. You save your money and you put money in a 401k and an IRA. So I was doing that and just going along my way. And I had a small brokerage account with an Edward Jones advisor, and just it cost me a lot of money in fees. And so I started looking around for better ways to invest, ways to avoid all these big fees, management fees, and investing expenses. And then I had this question about how do I get access to all this money, all this 401k and IRA money. I don't think, I was good with spreadsheets. And so I put together a spreadsheet and I figured out, I could probably quit working before I'm 59 and a half. So how do I get access to all this money in my retirement accounts? And that's what led me to the internet, the great place that a lot of financial independence seekers tend to gather now. But this was back in 2005 or so. I was looking around online, finding out about the Rule of 72T, pulling money out without paying a penalty. Learned about Vanguard, lower cost investing. So all this stuff started to really click for me. And that's when, around 2005, so about 1 year into my full-time career, I really started to think about it. I shifted the mindset from just frugality and saving to the mindset of I'm saving for a specific goal. I want to become financially independent and retire early. The goal originally was to retire in about 20 years, around age 45. And so that was, I came up with a spreadsheet of how much I need and how much I can save and investment returns and forecasted it all out. And so I said, okay, I need $2.5 million and that'll be enough. And then I can retire early. Fast forward 10 years and I had about a little bit more than half of that when I actually quit working. And that was because I figured out I really did not spend as much money as I thought I was spending. We paid down our mortgage almost in full by the time I quit working. And so it was just my expenses kept dropping and my portfolio kept going up. And then once I had enough, I think I had about a 3.25%, 3.5% withdrawal rate when I first quit working. And so it was a pretty safe, a pretty high margin of safety when I quit working and went into early retirement. And since then, the portfolio has actually grown by quite a bit over the past 5 years, just by virtue of a nice bull market.
Okay, so let's talk some numbers, because I know that there are a lot of people and we haven't gotten into some of these topics before. You mentioned a couple things. You mentioned the 72T rule. You mentioned low-cost index funds, which I think our listeners definitely know. You mentioned forecasting. You mentioned a 3.5 withdrawal rate and the high margin of safety. So, okay, let's talk about that 72T rule and accessing your money before 60.
Sure. So there's kind of two different ways to withdraw your money before you're 59 and a half. There's the rule of 72T, and it's very rigid in terms of you have to pull out a roughly equal amount each year for however many years it is up until you turn 59 and a half. For me, that would have meant withdrawing for roughly 27 years between age 33 and 59, or 59 and a half. And so it would have been, I would have had to have kept withdrawing money no matter what, every single year, regardless of how much money I needed. That was very inflexible. So I ended up looking at the Roth IRA conversion ladder, which is actually the method that I ended up choosing to use for myself to get access to my money before I'm 59 and a half without paying a penalty. Just to clarify, the Roth IRA conversion ladder, what it is in a nutshell is converting traditional IRA or traditional 401k assets over into Roth IRA money. The IRS lets you do this. You pay tax on it when you convert, and then 5 years later, you can withdraw any of those amounts that you have converted. You can withdraw those amounts penalty-free And since it's coming out of a Roth, actually, there's no income tax due on the amounts that you withdraw either. That's only the amounts you converted. So if you convert $30,000, then 5 years later, you can pull out $30,000. So the idea is each year you convert enough that will fund your future expenses 5 years out. And so that's sort of how I originally set things up in terms of my plan. And so that's the long term goal, is to follow this roughly follow this Roth IRA ladder.
So for those who are listening that might be interested in something like this, just to repeat parts of what you said, for the 72T rule, it's you take that first initial lump sum, which for you was how much, over $1 million?
Yeah, I think about 1.2 million.
Okay. And you chunk that out into 20 equal payments that come out every single year. There's no deviation. So in terms of paying taxes in that year, if you end up making any extra money for the next 20 years between 33 and 53, you're going to actually pay more. So it's more rigid.
Yeah, and there's a very specific IRS formula. It works out to be around 4% per year withdrawal. So it actually lines up pretty well with that 4% rule from the Trinity study from the 1980s or 1990s. But you pull out about 4% per year. But that's the problem that you've said. If you end up needing less money later on down the road, or if you end up working or getting into consulting, you go back to work full time, if you switch careers and do something, you're still forced to take all those withdrawals going forward, and it just adds on top of your income already. So it could actually push you up into that next tax bracket. So that's really the reason I tried to avoid it.
So then when you decide to go with the Roth IRA conversion ladder, can you tell us how soon or how early actually you had to start planning for that? Because if you need to wait 5 years to use that money, did you know at the 5th year that you were going to work 5 more years and start that conversion then?
I really see, this is where, people hold me out as an expert, but I don't hold myself out as an expert necessarily. I didn't really know what I was doing going into early retirement, because I thought I was going to be doing the 72T thing when I needed access to money. But then when I started learning more about it and reading more about it, I figured out that this Roth IRA conversion ladder is actually a more efficient method to get access to my traditional 401k and traditional IRA funds for me in my situation. A big part of that, a big piece of the puzzle is figuring out how do you fund the first 5 years of retirement while you're setting that ladder up. In my situation, I have a pretty large taxable brokerage account. It was about $300,000 or $400,000 when I quit working. And that's money that you can touch anytime that you want to without any kind of penalty. You just pay tax on any kind of gains when you sell something. So that was my seed money, if you want to call it that. My first 5 years of living expenses, in fact, first 10 years of living expenses would come out of the taxable brokerage account. And then that would give me, 5 to 10 years to set up this Roth conversion ladder. So that 5-year waiting period was never an issue for me. I didn't really plan on doing this when on day one of my early retirement, but it was something that I very quickly arrived at, that this would be a better, more flexible way to withdraw my money and have a lot more control over it. Because if I don't need it, I can just leave it in the Roth account and let it keep growing tax-free.
Exactly. And so I just have one more question, and later we can talk about the mortgage and a couple of other things. But the 3.5 withdrawal rate during a bull market, can you explain why you were able to pull 3.5% instead of the 4% that people talk about?
Yeah, so 4%, the 4% rule, as it's classically stated, is that if you pull out 4% of your portfolio, it'll have about a 95% chance of lasting for a 30-year period. And that's really all that rule promises you, is that historically speaking, you've got a 1 out of 20 chance of going bust within 30 years, and a 19 out of 20 chance that your money will last 30 years or longer. That's really the only thing that 4% rule tells you. And so as you apply the 4% rule, for someone who's in their 30s and retiring early and hoping to live successfully for hopefully 5 or 6 decades, you actually have to reduce that withdrawal rate below 4% if you still want to maintain a 95% success rate. So a high chance of success, you have to withdraw less money. So there have been subsequent studies and analysis, and it basically says, if you're going to do 40 or 50 or 60 years of retirement, you better get the rate down to about 3.4% withdrawal rate. And that's what you need to have that same level of safety, same level of survivability, if you will, the 95 percentile confidence level. So that's really I didn't want to really withdraw any more than 3.5%. Initially, just because if you have 5 bad years of market returns starting out and you're spending more than 3.5%, you really accelerate your portfolio drawdown and really increase your chances of having an unsuccessful early retirement, which just means you have to either cut spending or go back to work or do some of both, or make compromises somehow. So for me, it was just picking a number that was more safe. Around 3.5% was the ceiling that I had set on myself, to not take on too much risk early in my retirement.
Justin, just so that we can maybe provide some resources for our listeners, are there calculators out there to kind of figure where they are with the 4% rule and kind of forecast, how much they should withdraw? You talked about the 3.5 and 95%. I think you called it survivability. Is that what you called it?
Yeah, I guess it's the survivability or 95% level of confidence that your mind's gonna last that long. Yeah, there's 2 resources I can name off the top of my head, and there may be some more that have popped up since I quit working. The first one is FireCalc. I believe it's at firecalc.org. Google can certainly find it if not. And the other one is CFireSim, all one word. I believe it's also cfiresim.org online. But those are 2 calculators that I've used in the past just to help me model different scenarios. And there's some, each one of those 2 tools has different features that you can use to sort of get beyond just a simple 4% rule. You can tell that you want to retire, and you plan on 5 decades of retirement. You can put in your Social Security income projections. You can put in other sources of if you have a pension. So some of those other more complicated pieces of data for your own situation, you can also model that in there to see what happens if you just get rid of Social Security, for example, or what happens if you can put in a lump sum expense in the CFireSim calculator. So if you want to send your kids to college 10 years from now, or if you want to buy a new house 10 years from now, or you're planning on selling your house and packing up and leaving and living off that money for a while, you can kind of model that in those different tools to see what's the impact financially on that long-term portfolio survivability.
Nice, thank you. I hadn't heard of either one of those, so I'm anxious to go play with them and see how they match up to personal capital.
Yeah, it's a little bit different in terms of how they model it, but it's at the end of the day, it's the same sort of principle. It models your money's growth, and then it models portfolio drawdowns. And it's good. I think it's good to use several different calculators with different methodologies, just to give yourself a little bit of a confidence boost that you're looking at different ways, and if you're successful in all these different methods of evaluation, then you're probably on the right track.
You said that your wife was in the finance space, and I don't want to assume that she was already on board, because there are some financial professionals that maybe wouldn't be with the FIRE movement. But can you go back and tell us, when you were starting FIRE, was she the one who convinced you? Were you the one who convinced her to really go hard and really fully commit to some of these lifestyle changes?
I guess we never really were big spenders, and so I think we were already saving, thinking about thriftiness and wealth creation, even back during our college days. And so it was kind of like that first year of me working full time. I didn't have that concept of financial independence, early retirement. I didn't have that in my mind yet. So that was a new concept for us to switch from just saving and investing and growing wealthy without a real plan to saving and investing and growing wealthy for a specific purpose of not having to work ever again, hopefully in your 40s or maybe even 30s, as it turns out. And so, yeah, so in terms of getting her on board, we were of the same mindset, more or less, from the very beginning. And there wasn't any really persuasion either way. And we kind of just, because we started doing this almost right out of college, we never had a huge amount of lifestyle inflation that we had to then cut and sacrifice. So we've always kind of lived kind of like wealthy college students, I guess I would say. But I don't know, maybe that's not accurate. I don't know. But we never went out and bought, huge luxury cars and big house. We kept it kind of low key and just kept living comfortably, but not spending a large percentage of our income. I guess I'll say that.
You seem to just have it right from the beginning. Were your parents this way?
I think my parents were fairly frugal, and my wife's family was just fairly of very modest means. So I think she grew up not having a whole lot. So when she went to college and got her first job and everything, that some income was a lot more than what she used to have. And so, her standard of living went up quite a bit when she got those first paychecks, and she's able to afford a lot more stuff than growing up with. She grew up. She's from an immigrant family, and they came here, and she has 4 other siblings, and they used to live in a 2-bedroom house. And so, I mean, what we have now is like the American dream. I still think it is the American dream. But the people that live way out in the suburbs in the 4,000 square foot houses with several SUVs in the driveway would probably look at us and say, "Oh wow, these guys are like sacrificing and really cutting their expenses to the bone, and they're hurting. I couldn't live like that," which is just such a weird alien phenomenon that 75% of our country lives like us, or probably even worse off than us. But there's always someone that has more than you that kind of looks back and says, "Oh, there's no way I could live like that. I just couldn't stand to be poor like that. Oh, that seems so tough." But so, I mean, I think it's all relative of where you're coming from, and then what's normal for you. And so, how we're living now is exactly how I lived growing up. In fact, the house we live in is almost the same floor plan as the house that I grew up in on the other side of town, built in the same year and everything. So it's something that for me, it's not an upgrade or downgrade. It's just keep on, maintaining the status quo for me.
How did your wife feel coming as an immigrant and then basically becoming the millionaire next door?
I would say she feels fantastic. I think it's, I mean, I think it's one of those things where it is, it is the American dream, living it out, living out the experience of it. And she made about what I made every year. So it's not like I had a high income and I was pulling her along. I mean, she pulled half her weight. And so, I mean, I think it's just an example that it's possible to grow wealthy and do well in America, even if you start from a very low rung on a socioeconomic ladder. I don't know that I would say it's easy if you're starting at that point. I think possible and easy, those are two different things. But so I think it's an example of where if you make the right moves early on, position yourself to advance yourself and work hard, and just apply yourself and keep at it for a prolonged period of time, that perseverance aspect of financial independence. Eventually you'll get there. It could be in your 30s, might be in your 40s or 50s. And, if you're not starting until you're in your 40s, maybe in your 60s before you actually are able to retire at a regular age, not even an early age. But I guess there's no time better than now to start focusing on this stuff. And whether you're from an upper class family, middle class, lower class, immigrant family, she came to America, didn't speak any English, and had to go through the English as second language classes in school, and took a couple of years to get fully fluent in it. And it's just one of those one of those things you have to overcome in childhood as an immigrant. But yeah, I think she's happy and fortunate that she ended up in America and was able to. Public schooling is pretty good here in Raleigh. She grew up in Raleigh too, so she had a lot of resources there to help her transition into, I guess, adapting to the culture, adapting to the language, getting a good education early on.
So you said something before, Justin. You said responsible people. That's what you do. You were talking about the fact that, when you started your jobs and, you started putting into your retirement vehicles at your employment, that's kind of, you just knew how to do that. And I'm gathering that you absorbed from maybe your family growing up. So to our listeners out there that maybe did not have the benefit of that knowledge and are maybe newer to the FIRE movement, what are some of the first key critical steps that they should take?
Yeah, I think getting educated on the issues of how do you get to financial independence, and there's taxes, there's the investments, low cost investments, understanding risk, asset allocation, getting a good job, thinking about in terms of cost benefit analysis for everything in life, education, your kids, house, car, investments in your house, investments in your education, everything you're doing, you should be thinking about it through the lens of cost benefit analysis. How is this going to help me? What is it going to cost? Is it worth it? When I say everything, I mean the big things are the most important things you should be looking at from that perspective. Because I think that, and actually I took a class in cost benefit analysis during college, and because it interested me, this concept of measuring the benefits of something and then comparing it to what is the cost to get there, and then is it going to have a good expected return on investment for me. The class I took was really about public infrastructure, public investments, but you can apply the same kind of thought process to yourself. So I think thinking about things in a more financial way, and understanding the life cycle cost of things. So houses and cars are two big ones that you when you buy a house or buy a car, that's like half the cost of it. The other half is financing it, maintaining it, operating it, paying utilities, putting gas in it. You're going to have depreciation in there. You're going to have to upgrade it, do major repairs, renovations, etc. And so, thinking about things of not just the cost to acquire something up front, but there's going to be those trailing costs that are going to hit you every year for forever. Even if you pay off the mortgage, we paid off the mortgage and we still have plenty of housing expenses every year, month to month, and then big ones, every few years. So I think thinking about things in a more financial sense, getting some numbers, getting comfortable with doing the math behind comparing things, and the internet is wonderful. I mean, this is something that me growing up as a child of the 80s and 90s, we didn't really have resources like the internet to help us. And now it's now young people today graduating high school, college right now, they're so fortunate to have this huge resource of the smartest people on earth all in this one place called the internet. And you can look on there and find out all kinds of stuff. Just you type it in there or ask Siri, ask Google, and then it just spits out information for you. So I think that's I think for younger generations 10, 20, 30 years ago, we just didn't know any better. And it was hard to find the right book or get the right resource. And I think, books and education still play a big role in helping us become better stewards of our own money. But a good place to start to find those books and other resources is the internet as well. And it's something that really is egalitarian in a way where, anybody that can get to a public library and use a free computer there, I mean, you have access to, or if you have a smartphone, a $30 smartphone, you get on the Wi-Fi at McDonald's or Starbucks or the library and get access to all this information, just like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates is getting access to most of the information. So it's really kind of leveled the playing field in terms of who can aim for financial independence, who can save for it, and getting access to lower cost investments. That's another thing. I mean, Vanguard was around 20 or 30 years ago, but it was harder to find out information about it, and it really has taken off in the last 20 years. There, I think their assets under management have quadrupled in the past couple of decades. I mean, just huge growth there as people are realizing that they can cut out the middleman that's making most of their investment returns and keeping them for themselves, the brokers, um, and then getting that money back in their own pocket to make themselves wealthy.
I love what you said, that the internet has made things egalitarian, and it's absolutely true. I'm reading Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, and she was talking about her childhood and, where you go for information when you were our age. And we went to Encyclopedia Britannica if you had one, like if you were lucky enough that your parents could afford to buy the big, huge, set, and like, it's outdated immediately. And the internet is just not that way. There's just so much information out there just at your fingertips. And for us growing up, our parents said, go look it up, go get the encyclopedia. But for our kids, it's go Google it.
Yes.
Yeah. And you said that your mortgage is paid off. I'm interested to hear more about that. When did you pay off your mortgage?
So we had been working toward paying it off, kind of with the goal of having it paid off roughly around the time that we quit working. And so we started on a 30-year mortgage like most people. We refinanced it into a 15-year and then refinanced into a 10-year. I think there might have been a couple of refinances in there somewhere as rates went down. And then we ended up refinancing into a 5-year mortgage. I don't know, a few years before we ended up paying it off, but we actually paid it off about 2 years early. So what we were doing was, as we were making more money with raises and getting bonuses, that kind of thing, we had the capacity to pay more towards our mortgage each month. So we took advantage of slightly lower interest rates as we refinanced. When you go with a short-term loan, you often get a lower interest rate. So we were we're paying less interest because we're paying it off faster. And we're also forcing ourselves to pay it off faster so that we don't have a mortgage going into retirement. And so the timing of it was a little bit messed up. It actually was about 2 years after I quit working when we paid it off. And I ended up just selling a chunk of stock and paying off the mortgage, probably around 2015 or so. And it was just, the goal was to get our expenses lower as a baseline going into retirement, just so that we can live on very little if we absolutely have to, if the markets do really poorly and we want to cut spending, just to get more conservative. And so it was essentially just paying off the mortgage as a form of deleveraging, reducing our risk, reducing that required monthly cash outflow that we have to make every month.
Okay. Because I was going to ask you, and that pretty much answers the question. The question I was going to ask was, why did you opt to pay off the mortgage as opposed to maybe investing money instead? And it seems that's the answer, is that you wanted to reduce your monthly expense.
So then that brings me to a question, because I was wondering, as we transition more to your daily life, you have a wife who's obviously on board, but then you have kids, and kids have peer pressure. So you have to cover the growing children, the clothing, feed these growing bodies. You have to keep them occupied. How do you and your wife teach your kids about frugality? Do you have to do that? If you don't have a mortgage, is your budget one that's very robust for them? And do you ever face any spending struggles that relate to providing experiences or learning opportunities for them?
Oh, okay. So lots of questions there. I guess we sort of approach it in terms of letting them have some autonomy over how they spend their money. And so we try to keep them flush with cash through rewards if they do well on report cards, basically like a scholarship, more or less. Christmas and birthdays, we tend to give them some cash or mostly cash in lieu of a large gift. And so that kind of lets them decide, do I want a $30 smartphone or a $100 smartphone, or do I want to save up and get a brand new $1,000 smartphone? And so I think, we kind of put the choice on them. One of them has already lost a smartphone. Luckily, it was the $30 version. So the pain to replace a $30 smartphone for them is not very great. If it was $500 smartphone that they lost and they had to pay out of their own pocket to replace, that would be probably a year or two at least of any kind of birthday money, Christmas money, special gifts from family. And so I think it really it lets them decide what do they want to do and take on and we explain to them, that sometimes we opt to buy less expensive things because we don't want to have to take care of them as much and worry about losing them or breaking them or having someone steal them. When we go on vacation, for example, we travel a lot. So we kind of think about, well, if our laptop gets soaked in our book bag or it gets thrown around and crushed if we're on a bus or a plane or something, I'm not going to worry about having a $300 or $400 laptop get crushed. If it was a $3,000 MacBook, I would be really sad if my computer got destroyed and I had to buy another $3,000 computer. So we talk about that some with them and they make their own decisions about a lot of the technology, what they want, how much they get of it, whether they're spending a little bit or a lot. And the oldest one's 13, so I think she's starting to get wanting. She's looking at nicer smartphones, and that's okay. It's something that if she spends a lot of time on her phone, so it makes sense to have something that's nicer and that she uses more. The 12-year-old doesn't really like her phone, doesn't really care that much about it. She has it in case she needs it or casual use, but we sort of let them make a lot of their own choices. And in terms of do they feel peer pressure? Of course. I mean, I think any kid will, rich or poor, because there's always going to be somebody that's richer than you, or at least someone whose parents spend more money on them than your parents spend on you. That's probably the key thing there. And so we had the weird experience of having one of the poorest schools for elementary school. So they tended to be much wealthier than most of their peers. And then the middle school now they go to is probably one of the wealthiest schools in the district. And so they've gone from being the wealthier people to the less wealthy people. At least, they're less wealthy. We're wealthy. The parents are wealthy. The kids are not wealthy yet. But they still have school supplies, book bags, clothes, shoes, cell phones, calculators, all the computers. I mean, all the stuff that they need to function at school and get by. And so I think, I don't know. I mean, I think we're doing a good enough job there. I don't know if they silently sulk about not getting tons and tons of money, but we kind of joke with them and say, we're wealthy. You're not wealthy yet, but you can get there, and we can help you get there. Stay in school, kids. And so that's kind of the approach we've taken so far, and it seems to be working pretty well. They're responsible with money. Here's an example of it. They like these Bluetooth wireless headphones, so if they're listening to music or playing games, they can put it on and just let parents don't have to get annoyed by it. It's great. But they're one of the kids, their headphones broke, and then they're looking at different colors and styles of headphones, and one set was $16 and one set was $25 for a different color. And I said, that's fine with me. You can get whatever color you like. Just you have to pay for it. It's your headphones. You broke the old set. You can get a new set, and you can get whatever color you like at whatever price that you like. And she ended up going for the $16 set of headphones that seem to be working just fine so far. So that's just letting them get used to making those money decisions that all, every teen, every college student, every adult will have to make at some point about how do they spend their money, what do they value, and those trade-offs between getting what you absolutely want, the ideal perfect thing, versus getting the next best thing but saving a whole lot of money on it. So hopefully those are valuable lessons for them, and they don't feel like we've cheated them out of living the high life during their youth.
Yeah, I think that experience of going from the poorer school to the more wealthy school was definitely a chance for some culture shock. I remember when you said that, I think I heard you maybe 4 years ago on maybe Joshua Sheets' podcast or something, and you said that you were in a district that had kind of bad schools, or it was something along those lines. So it's interesting to see how that change happened over time. Now, do your kids realize how different their situation is with having two, I imagine, stress-free? You always seem to be so relaxed, whenever I hear you. So I'm imagining these two stress-free parents at home that can all come to the school if something's going on, or that can be as involved as they need to be. Do they recognize their situation? Do you help them to see that, as much as it's important to you? Is it something that they recognize and cherish as well?
I don't know if they cherish it. I think they recognize it, and we'll bring it up sometimes and highlight the fact that what we're doing is kind of weird, kind of out of the normal to have two stay-at-home parents instead of most people have none, no stay-at-home parents, or maybe one stay-at-home parent. And so it is weird for them, I guess, and explaining it sometimes at school. If what do your parents do? Oh, my dad's a doctor, a lawyer, engineer, a policeman, whatever. And my kids, I guess they say, my parents are retired. My dad has a blog. So I guess it's a kind of a different sort of lifestyle in a way, and we like I mentioned, we travel a lot, which is very different than most people that have full-time jobs. We tend to spend anywhere from 4 to 9 weeks on vacation during the summer, plus a couple of weeks during the school year usually, and contrasting that with the typical 2 to 3 weeks total vacation throughout a year that most working people are able to do. It is kind of different. I mean, my kids have told me before that when they really don't tell people at school that much about the full extent of the vacations. So they may say we went to the Bahamas, not we spent a month in the Bahamas this summer, because a lot of them just don't believe them that it's so far fetched that how are you, this regular student that doesn't have super fancy expensive shoes and $1,000 jackets, like how are you able to go to the Bahamas for a month in the summertime? And it's because we don't spend $1,000 on a jacket or $200 on shoes. We could spend that money to go stay in the Bahamas for a month instead. So I think they have encountered that some at school in terms of like the lifestyle that's different, and the spending choices that are different than some of their peers, that their peers' families have chosen. So I guess it's, I guess they cope with it however they do.
I think it would be interesting to maybe fast forward 10 years and get their perspective in 10 years.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I've followed some people that have kids that have grown up with early retired parents, and then their kids are now out there in their 20s. Doug Nordman, Nords. I don't know if you guys may have crossed paths with him before, but his daughter is I don't know, she's probably 25 or maybe 30 by now. I think she's married and a military officer, finished college, did really well. She's in the military, has a few years left on her first enrollment. And so Doug he told me, he was kind of who I followed, with the whole mindset towards kids and what to do. And so I've kind of seen his kid grow up from the age my kids are now up to, a successful adult. And so I'm kind of hoping that my kids will end up doing something similar where, they realize that they take advantage of opportunities, and then they get on their own path towards maybe not necessarily financial independence, that's up to them, but at least responsible money management. Hopefully these lessons they're learning today will translate into a more successful launch experience, where they're able to take care of their own finances and be responsible at a relatively early age, so that, when they're 30, or let's fast forward 10 years, 23, 22 years old, that they're not still floundering about and not really able to transition into adulthood successfully, that they're really relying on us completely. I've seen that with other people as they grow up, that it's sort of So, and I think this is not just today's generation. I think this has happened for a long time. Um, but that that inability to transition from young adult, 18, 19, 20 years old, from young adult into being a fully responsible adult, um, age 22. Yeah, I'm just thinking like post college, age 21, 22, 23. Making that, it's a big leap. I mean, it can be scary if you've never had to make any decisions financially for yourself, and you've always had tons of wealth, and to go from living in a wealthy household where they spend tons of money on you to self-sufficient adult at age 22 that may not have a career that pays a lot of money at age 22 as an entry-level employee. That's a really daunting transition to make, and a big step down in terms of lifestyle. And so I don't know if that's the reason that some people struggle as much as just that realization that, oh, wait a second, I'm not actually wealthy. My parents were wealthy, and then they're not still willing to funnel me money when I'm 25 or 30 or 35. So I think, yeah, I'm hoping my kids will be a little bit maybe have a head start on getting off mom and dad's payroll and going out and succeeding in the world on their own. But I guess we'll see. I don't know.
What sort of like guardrails do you have in place? You've been retired now for 5 years, right?
Yeah, 5 years.
So your oldest was maybe 8, and then the 12-year-old was 7, and then the littlest one, I'm not sure how old.
He was 1 when I quit working, and he's 6 now.
I was thinking about this as you were speaking. How do you then teach when you grow up? And if you take a traditional sort of job, you're going to have to go to work every day. Your life is not going to be like mommy and daddy's because they really haven't seen that, get up with the 9 to 5. How do you kind of put those guardrails in place for them so that they know what to expect?
Yeah, I guess I guess they still have to get up right now for school, get up very early. And sometimes we have to get up early to get them to the bus stop, get them to school, pick them up, etc. And so that, they see that we still have responsibilities, and the older two, they remember when we were working. My wife worked for a few years after I quit working. She retired about 3 years ago now. So the older two definitely remember one or both of us working, at least in terms of we weren't there. We're not physically present. I don't think kids at that age, 8 or 9, 10 years old, they don't really understand what you do at work. They just know that you're not there with them, and then you come later, and then you're there. So it's more of they notice your absence more than they notice what you're doing at work. So I don't really know that like working 9 to 5 really teaches them a lot about what you do or how you make money. It's more of just they understand it's a responsibility. And so I guess we've kind of always explained to them, and we're starting to talk about this more now of what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to do to make money? And because what do you want to do when you grow up is usually either I don't know or I love watching anime and playing video games. And so, we kind of talk about that of like, well, there are careers that are centered around this, and you can actually be a professional gamer. That's an occupation now. You can kind of do some free-spirited stuff, or you could follow some kind of a more traditional career route. If you engineering or computers or animation or there's lots of different things. So we're just sort of talking to them about different ways to make money and succeed. And so I think setting that expectation of they're going to be on their own at some point, and there's going to be a transition period where they will go to college and then have to go out and figure out a way to make money themselves. And part of that is just because we just aren't wealthy enough to fund our children's living expenses indefinitely. And so I don't know if we've made that explicitly clear with our kids, but at some point, I guess we will have to lay out the timeline of our expectations maybe more specifically. But yeah, so I think it's discussing things with them, and I think they see enough of how everyone else around them, all their peers at school, and they have parents that work or have businesses. and so they see what most people's lives are like, and then we can use our own lives of how we had to work hard, save and invest, and then we were able to quit working. And so, I mean, it would make me happy if they did what we did, and by the time they're 30 something, retired as well, or at least shifted in some kind of a slower paced career they really enjoyed. Um, and maybe they'll do that from the onset, and then just they may not make as much money, but maybe they'll be happier. I don't know. I'm just hoping that eventually we can get them off the payroll and get them out there in the real world and succeeding on their own. That's the end goal for us, and I guess our main job as parents.
Just quickly, did you save any money for them for college? Do they know that much about like when the payroll stop for them?
We haven't discussed like specifically when the money will shut off. But we've discussed college in kind of general terms of we've saved some money and they may have to get a job at some point to help pay their way through college or for spending money. And really a lot of that just comes down to how much do we actually have available to help them out when college comes around. We do have dedicated 529s that will pay for most of their tuition itself. And then it's just a matter of, are they living on campus in a dorm, living off campus, staying here with us and going to the North Carolina State University here in town. So I think there's lots of options there. And we could certainly make it work if they want to go the traditional route of living on campus and doing the same things that everyone else does in college. So I think it just depends on the kid, what they're ready for. And if financially, I think we can make it happen somehow. And it may be that they have to help out some, or if they stay here, I mean, it's maybe they don't have to put a dime in there, and they may, if they get a job, they can just save that money and go on vacation all summer with the earnings from their job. I don't know the exact setup we're going to have, but at some point we're going to have to sit them down and kind of discuss the financing of it and figure out. First, we have to figure out what we're going to do for sure, and then sit down with them and have a more numbers-based discussion, a more fact-based discussion that goes beyond just general talking about college and finances and that sort of thing. So that's somewhere down the road. The oldest is in 8th grade, so she's got about 4.5 years until college starts. So I know applications for college and looking at how much college costs, that's all going to start probably 2.5 years from now, just the beginning of it. So we'll definitely be looking at that. I know some of their friends have already mentioned where they want to go to college, and I think they've seen some older cousins that have graduated high school and stuff that they've done. So I think they have examples of what to do maybe and what not to do, things to think about. So that's going to be down the road. And like I said, I don't know 100% what we're even going to provide for them. It'll be something. It probably won't be everything, but we'll make sure that they at least understand what we're going to be able to provide, and so they don't get shocked or surprised, in year 3 of college that, oh, the money's out. We're on our own now. That's not our intention at all.
So one other question, and it's just for personal interest. What does one do when they're retired in terms of health care? Because that's the big question in the FIRE movement, and you've been in that status for a number of years now. What do you do?
Yeah, so with the Affordable Care Act that was passed probably about 8 years ago now, it went into effect in 2014, started providing big subsidies for health insurance in 2014. So it's been around for 5 years now. This is the 5th year that you've been able to get a subsidy to help pay for health insurance. And the subsidies are for not just low-income people. They're actually for people that up into the bottom edge of the upper middle classes. A family of 5 like mine, we could make, I think, about $116,000 per year and still receive a pretty sizable subsidy. to help pay for health insurance. And so we just each year we apply for through the healthcare.gov online, go on there and apply, put in our adjusted gross income information from our tax form, put in all the information for the kids and our ages, date of birth, and all that stuff. And it spits out a number and says, okay, here's what you can get for a subsidy. And here's 15 different insurance plans you can pick from that all cost different amounts. And we usually pay very little for health insurance because our income is relatively low, just because it's some of it is just capital gains coming from investments. And some of that is, you're not taxed on 100% of a mutual fund or ETF. When you sell it, you only get taxed on the gains. So our income is lower than what a lot of people that are spending as much as we do. Our income is actually fairly low. So we do very well in terms of the amount of the subsidy that we receive right now while the kids are in the house. Eventually that subsidy will get smaller and we'll pay a larger proportion of our health insurance as the kids are out of the household. But it's just as an example, I think we've paid between $38 up to about $125 per month for some pretty good health insurance with low deductibles, low copays, that sort of thing. And our adjusted gross income, just so people know, it's around 40 to 42,000 per year for our family of five. So it brings us down pretty close to the poverty line, which is bizarre to say that we're living at the poverty line, but we're a little bit above the poverty line in terms of our adjusted gross income, which is just a number on a tax form. It's not actually has very little relation to what we actually spend or how we live. But yeah, the Affordable Care Act, if you have not figured out the health insurance puzzle yet, check it out. For a married couple with no kids, the income limit's about $65,000 per year. If you make less than that, you're probably going to get a small subsidy. If you make a lot less than that, you're going to get a pretty big subsidy. So it's definitely something to look into. There are alternatives that, from my point of view, just don't look as good. The health share ministries, if you make too much money or you have lumpy income that goes up and goes down, but you don't know what it'll be, those health share ministries are a little bit or a good bit less than paying full price for regular health insurance, but they come with a lot of gotchas that you have to understand. It's not real insurance. It's not full insurance. It's not a contract that guarantees you payment for your medical expenses. It's kind of like you're participating in a charity pool and you hope that they end up paying you back for what they say they might pay you back for. So that's always an option out there. I've seen several early retirees using that as a source of catastrophic health care. So just do your due diligence with that, and then definitely check out the Affordable Care Act subsidies to see what you might qualify for, and to some extent you can plan your income as well to make sure that if you're close to the threshold where you get nothing, if you make just a little bit less, you might actually you can make $2,000 less on your tax return and receive thousands and thousands of dollars of subsidies just for a little bit of clever tax planning.
I'm glad you asked that question, Tamika. That was such good information. And Susie Orman would probably be aghast that your adjusted gross income is $40,000 and you actually live very well, right?
Yeah, I think it just, I have an article on my blog of how I kind of looked at how we're living and said, well, we're living basically like most families that earn $100,000 per year. Like we're living like them, but we don't have a mortgage. We don't pay a lot in taxes because our income is lower. We don't have childcare expenses. So a lot of the things that normal families like ours have to pay for and pay a lot for, we don't have those expenses. And we still take big, long vacations. We still have a car. We still have a big house, relatively big house, 4 bedrooms. We have electronics coming out of our ears, it seems like. And so it's really not this life of sacrifice at all. But it's just that we spend less and our income is less, and so there's kind of a domino effect of you spend less money, you need less money, you have lower income, you pay less taxes, that saves you more money, and so you kind of economize. There's several different contributing factors that end up helping you economize in different ways.
Right. So if you take out the largest expenses that we typically have, which are a mortgage, which are a car payment and childcare, you can live on a lot less. And I think that's the lesson.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's, when you start looking at, there's so many costs of working. We had two cars when we were both working, and now we get by pretty well in one car. So just, we've cut our car expenses in half. And yeah, childcare is a big one. We were lucky to have both sets of family in town here that helped us take care of the kids during the day, and we paid them some, but it was nowhere near the $800 to $1,000 per month that I'm hearing from some people around here. And then, I hear people in New York that are saying, well, there's nothing you can find that's less than $2,000 a month, and which that number is just, that's crazy. I mean, that's like a full-time salary for some people around here.
So Justin, we are just about out of time. And for all of our guests, we have a few final closeout questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. What was one lesson that you learned about money or finances, either good or bad, that you have carried over into your FIRE journey?
I would say focusing on investment costs was a big one that I had to learn the hard way by paying a couple $1,000s too much to an investment advisor very early on. So getting rid of him and going and doing it myself saved me a lot of money.
Okay. And then do you have any life hacks that either help you save money or bring you joy?
Well, I'm kind of into the whole credit card travel hacking thing. So it saves me money and I enjoy it. I feel like I'm getting one over on the credit card companies, which is it's kind of like beating the casino. So I guess I would say that it hits both those points.
Okay, great. And then are you reading anything right now, either a book or a blog? And if so, what are your takeaways?
Most of my reading now is just general leisure reading. I don't really read a lot of personal finance. I keep up with a few people in the blogosphere, Millennial Revolution, Go Curry Cracker, Mr. Taco. So some different people out there. But yeah, most of my reading, I'm reading a book right now about this guy that worked as a waiter on a cruise ship. I like to take cruises, and so I find the cruise industry interesting from a business and a personal standpoint. And so I'm reading I guess it's a mostly nonfiction book. I think it's called Cruise Confidential, but you might have to fact check me on that. But it's just a kind of a trashy nonfiction.
I was just going to ask you.
I think it's
Below Deck on reality TV or something.
It reads like a reality TV show, and so I kind of want to Google around and figure out, like, is it 50% accurate? Is it 75? Like what percentage of this is the truth? But it's interesting.
I love it. Not what I would have expected you to say. And Justin, what is the best way for people to find you?
Well, the best way I would say is my blog. So I blog semi-regularly at rootofgood.com, and I'm on social media on Facebook and Twitter, and it's Root of Good blog at both those places. And you can find me at the blog, rootofgood.com. There's links to Twitter and Facebook on there too. So yeah, that's pretty much, reach out. Let me know what's going on.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Justin, for being on the show. This has been fun.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both.
Well, House of Five family, that brings this episode to a close. If you've liked what you've heard, please subscribe in iTunes, as well as any of the other platforms you've found us on. We're on just about all of them. Also, please leave us a written review. They help us to know what you're liking about the show, what we can do better. And for every 5 reviews we receive, that's written reviews, we will give away one of our favorite reads, and that is currently Kids' Money Habits by Amy Coit. It's a great book full of great information, both for parents and kids. Don't forget to check out our show notes on the webpage. There is always bonus information there that didn't make it to the show, and we strive to create good content on there. So please head on over to the website and check that out. Finally, you can find us on Facebook. You can either like our page Or you can become part of our Facebook group. It's a private group, and in there we have ongoing discussions about each episode as well as other topics within the FI community. It's a way for us to get to know each other better and for Tamika and I to learn exactly what you want to hear more of or questions that you have that we can address with upcoming guests. Again, thank you for listening. Come back next week. We're glad you're here.